with the Assad's regime gone, and I will be starting shows for at least a bit longer with that statement. It's looking really bad for Iran. It has been looking pretty bad for Iran for the last year because of and I can hear myself twice. Uh, because of the amount of their proxies being attacked, being destroyed in many cases, the leaders of those proxies being wiped out to the point of that I stopped checking who is the current Secretary General of Hezbollah because it's usually won't stay that for long. But today we're gonna do sort of a retrospective episode, looking back really about what has happened to uh, to Iran's proxies, such as Hezbollah, such as Hamas, the leaders of Hamas, Assad's regime, the Houthis, and all that. So there's a lot to talk about. There's also a lot to talk about concretely Iran itself, because a lot of actions have been taken against Iran directly or Iran representatives. So that might be a separate episode because I think I'm happy there's so much stuff to talk about because it really shows that Israel has done a lot despite us almost always criticizing Israel for not doing enough. I think it's good to always look back and sort of have a bit more fun episode, because I also remind people about every single episode where we talk about these specific things, so you can go back because those were pretty fun episodes. Joining me today are Marco, Richard, and Alex. Welcome to the reality show. And let me also remind people that today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by Jim Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. Link to the Amazon page is in the description and in the chat, and you'll also hear more about it later in the video. But maybe before we go to particulars, let me just start with you, Alex. When it comes to specifically just looking at Israel's actions against Iran's proxies, how do you sort of evaluate the last year and let's say 2 months basically since October 7th?
Yeah, so yeah, I would say overall it's been amazing because, you know, I would have said that the Ring of Fire that kind of Iran has been building, that's what they call it, right? The Ring of Fire, that they've been building up over the past, 20, 15 years. I would have thought it would have taken us 10 years to break free from a lot of that. And it seems as though we've achieved so much in 3 months, specifically at the same time, whilst being under partial embargo, whilst the leaders are being tried in various, three-letter courts up and down various lands. And at the same time, as there's just this kind of hybrid warfare as well that's going on against Israel and against Jews, sort of all around the world. I think it's phenomenal that we've managed to accomplish so much. My only fear, I suppose, is that we're going to be stopping here, or we're going to be stopping soon. When it's almost like, I can smell victory. I really can. I can smell victory. It's like so good. And I think that if we are going to snatch defeats right from the jaws of victory, it will be a huge moral defeat for Israel. But for me, I don't think Biden will let Israel have it. He doesn't want Israel to be strong. He doesn't want Israelis to hold their head up high. He won't let us feel too powerful for too long.
Yeah, and talking about Biden, every single of these actions pretty much was taking without the consultation of the US. I'm trying to just quickly look through them, just to see. I mean, the one that has been, we probably won't talk about it, about the Israeli strike of Iran. Probably won't have time to cover that today, which technically was in cooperation with Biden, or with Biden's cabinet. But well, I won't say what we'll cover first. Let me go to Marco. How do you look at this year so far, or look at, this year and 2 months, last 2 months of the last year?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly Israel has had some significant victories, and the fact that now we got rid of the living dead from the White House is actually even more promising than whatever Israel has done until now, because you can guarantee that uh, once Trump is in place after January 20, it's only 5 or 6 weeks, isn't it? He will not uh, try and deal with Iran. We know already that Iran is trying to play both sides by saying, "Oh, look at us, we're so moderate. We're open to have a deal. We're open to be more moderate, more open to the West, like they've done in the past." But at the same time, they are doubling up on producing a uranium grade, a weapon grade uranium, in order to try and say back attack the West and Israel in particular, on the sly, like they kind of try and do with the ballistic missile in October and April. So I'm pretty sure that there's not going to be a deal to be found with Iran, and I'm pretty sure that Iran will not stop its nuclear program, its nuclear weapon ambition, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to get some kind of walloping from the West. Hopefully, a joint Israeli-US attack on Iran, just to make sure that the regime either is removed totally or weakened to the point where the people of Iran can finally break free from these monsters, these Islamic fuel monsters, and have a chance to live in a freer society, if not, not an Israeli-like society, but certainly a much freer society. And to be honest, the fall of the regime in Iran, anything you put in place chances are it's going to be an improvement. So let's hope so.
Let's look at those proxies generically. Let's look at the notion of proxies and what the effect has been of the past year and a bit. So, I mean, what are the reasons for having proxies in the first place? Well, there are like three key reasons, aren't there? It allows you to fight at arm's length, for one. So it means that any retaliation to the proxy doesn't hit you, Iran. It hits the person you've outsourced your dirty work to. It allows you to have some deniability. Now, that deniability is completely see-through to anybody rational, but there are plenty of people who don't wish to see that. So they're either gullible or they choose to pretend that Iran isn't behind everything and their attention is distracted to whichever proxy we're talking about, and it becomes the pinhole vision we're so used to. And then there's the border proximity of being right near your enemies. And effectively the fact that you're right on Israel's border, aren't you? In the case of like Hezbollah and southern Lebanon, you've suddenly, Iran is no longer far away. It's got short range ability to use short range missiles from just over the border. Each of those things has been seriously harmed, thankfully, by Israel's actions in fighting back in the way it has across the year and a bit. So you've essentially you've started to remove those threats from the border, and of course the most recent example being the Syria buffer zone, and of course the fact that Israel has now taken on that entirely for the time being, and of course the efforts Israel's making to destroy Syrian weaponry right across Syria that could pose a future threat. So all of those three reasons, though, are seriously reduced by Israel's actions, and that has to be a measure of the success of the last year and a bit.
Okay, so now let's look at the individuals, and I'm looking at my list, sort of trying to pick out which is the best way to start. I have a couple of videos about a bunch of them, and maybe you guys, if you have a preference, we can jump to something. But let's start with this one. I think it's pretty iconic. So there was no sound, by the way. I'm not sure if I just downloaded the wrong thing or if there is no sound even in the original recording. But for those who don't remember, that was Sinwar. That was, sort of oftentimes called the architect of October 7th. He's the terrorist who was already in Israeli prison before for killing Jews and for killing Israelis, and has been let out, because of the uh, uh, basically hostage deal for a soldier. And at the time he was killed, he was also the leader of Hamas. We'll go to who else was also killed before, but when people see this clip, many people try to, on the pro Hamas side, try to say, "Oh, he was fighting to the death." With his last strength, he like threw the stick, and we had, I think, me, Mark, and Richard had an episode about that, titled "Sinwar died a coward," because that's exactly what he is. He's just a random terrorist. Again, my favorite thing about this is Israel wasn't targeting Sinwar. Israel was just wiping out terrorists in the region, and it just happened. One of those terrorists, like any other, happened to be Sinwar. So I really love the sort of poetic nature of the dead, that he's no different. He's just like any other terrorist. And however people like to, bringing up as like a resistance fighter or something, he really, this was I think, a really great blow to Hamas. And again, really great to see. It was a lovely episode. I think the episode specifically about that one was Sinwar Dead. It was the daily objective 1222, if you'd like to look back. But I mean, Alex, how did you feel when you heard about Sinwar being dead? I think it was a bit unsure for a bit. I think it took a little bit to have like an official confirmation, but pretty early there were pictures of him sort of like already being in the rubble, and a bit later we got this actual video.
I think that episode you referred to there went from being a question mark to an exclamation mark during the episode.
Yeah. It's interesting because it was good to kill him. I think definitely it was very it felt good, but it didn't feel quite as good as what catching him live would have felt like, and having him stripped down to his underwear with all of the rest of the terrorists just being kind of shuffled through the streets with the rest of the terrorists. For me, that would have been probably much more powerful. And in terms of Sinwar as well, I just want to kind of clear something up. He was actually in jail for killing Palestinians. When he was, released by during the Gilad Shalit deal, he tortured 4 Palestinians to death because he suspected them of collaborating, because that's just the kind of guy he was, but really just a murderer, torturer, and he actually knew how to speak kind of pidgin Hebrew. And this has always been something that Israelis well, not Israelis, the Israeli defense establishment just really loves that. When they can get these kind of, mass murderers and terrorists to speak a little bit of pidgin Hebrew, it's like kind of, oh, they're just like, they understand us, or I don't know. I hate it. I hate it so much. We always saw that as well with Marwan Barghouti. He also, he's the guy, the terrorist who he's the brainchild basically of sorry, actually he's the person who masterminded all of the suicide bombings. It was his campaign, and then you would have him on Israeli TV speaking in this kind of Hebrew with the Hebrew subtitles, just giving us this totally subversive crap. So that would have been really great if we would have been able to get to actually catch him alive, because one of the things that I knew is that Sinwar could not come out of a tunnel the day that the war finished and make the V for victory sign, Okay, like that was just didn't really matter what. Okay, better that he just is lost in the sunset, right? But that because that specific image would have been, it would have made the whole thing a victory, right? The whole war, doesn't matter if all of Gaza is destroyed, that one image would be the one image that would actually live on. We saw that very specifically with Yasser Arafat. You know, that's no matter what, right? He was always just, you know, making this, you know, V for victory sign. When in actuality, you know, he should have died in prison, and instead he died a free man in Paris. Which, so it also, in terms of this whole argument about the proxies, okay, it was 2 days after October 7th, it was Anthony Blinken that came out and made this really phenomenal statement that I just thought it was just fantastic. You know, in the fact that it was so unbelievably dumb. He said that there was no proof that, you know, that Iran was funding or had any part in planning the October 7th attacks, and, you know, used that as a reason to, you know, not completely and utterly enforce the sanctions, to excuse, you know, the State Department's own policies towards Iran, and to mask them, right? Because, you know, it doesn't look very good when you have this, you know, huge pogrom that's been live streamed to all of the American public. If then, you know, people might, you know, come across and say, well, yeah, so like, what about the Iran nuclear deal? That seems to me as if that's something that we shouldn't have pursued. That's a bad policy. And, you know, obviously not enforcing the sanctions, right? So he had to mask that from the of course, from the American public until, of course, April, when Iran directly attacked, and then everything then came out to the forefront. That was actually a very important moment, I think. It was very important to have that all completely out in the open, right? It's no longer an open secret. There's no longer any more deniability. Now it's at the forefront, and you cannot run away from it. And for me, as a, you know, as an Israeli, it was something that was very, I actually saw that as being a very positive turn of events. Because you know, the reason as well that they have the proxies is also, they call it their defensive depth, right? Is so that you have layers and layers and layers and layers of deniability, and layers as well of various different proxies that you can then use to deter the Israelis. Okay, like, we can't go after Iran because then we're going to get, like, you know, ballistic missiles from Lebanon, and then we're going to get ballistic missiles and drones from the Shia militias in Iraq, and also forgetting we're also just going to get the Iron Dome's going to get completely, you know, overwhelmed because of these lunatics in Gaza. So that's their, you know, kind of, yeah, strategic thinking, right, behind the proxies. And I loved as well, he said, it was Iran's foreign minister. He came out and he said the Israelis have undone in 3 weeks what took us 14 years to build. And I just thought, wow, that's made everything just so worthwhile. I mean, I want to get like a calendar with that quote in like lights.
Yeah, and you know, talking about the first Iranian attack, the reasoning for it was the retaliation for the Israeli bombing of Iranian embassy in Damascus, and we'll also talk about Syria a bit later. But going to you, Marco, and maybe I'll add a few more names just so we can comment more broadly. But also, you know, Sinwar wasn't the only one. Terrorists got killed. We could go, you know, cover every single one. But I think two more important mentions are, of course, Ismail Haniyeh, the former leader of Hamas, who was actually killed directly in Iran, which later led or was used as a justification for the second Iranian attack. And of course Mohammed Dave, which we still don't have international confirmation that he's dead, so maybe we shouldn't talk about it. But at least since he has but of course he has an arrest warrant on him by the by the ICC. So even if he's alive, I'm sure he'll go in front of the international tribunal. But I mean, Marco, what about these other guys? Or if you want to comment on Sinwar too.
Well, I mean, frankly, the death of Sinwar was, as you said, there was some poetic beauty in it, in the sense that he was dying. He was injured to death. He was just waiting to die on that sofa, and him being able to stare at the drone and realizing that actually he's been spotted, and know for sure that his minutes, his seconds were up. That's just beautiful, because it would be a shame for him just to blow up and not realize what's happened. There, he knew for sure his reign of terror was up. So, it's quite nice to know that. And the fact that his body laid there for hours before he was actually recovered is even, it's enjoyable to think of it. I know you shouldn't be happy for somebody's death, but this is not the kind of person that deserved to live in the first place. Also, I would like to chime about what Alex was saying earlier on. We've been told a number of lies, clearly, like Biden is fit to act as a president. And there was this cover-up for 4 years, and it only came out during that debate where they couldn't hide it anymore. At the same time, we've been lying for years, told that Russia is this kind of formidable enemy we shouldn't upset. And then Iran is this formidable enemy we shouldn't upset because they got branches and tentacles and all this kind of stuff. And then poor little Israel goes around and, as Alex said, in a few weeks, gets into the knees, literally. And now you have the Ayatollah and the other buffoons in the tunics scrabbling around trying to understand what to do next. And I wonder who's in the West who keeps covering their arses? Who's in the West who keep telling us we can't touch them? I mean, is there a coincidence that Biden was vice president to Obama? Is that the Obama machine behind it that keeps pushing the scandal lies to the international community and trying to frightening us into not defending ourselves because the guy is dangerous? Well, Israel by itself showed that it can tackle that and more. Imagine a coalition of Western powers if they really wanted to put Iran back in a box, what they could do. And in overnight, in a weekend, you could just get rid of the problem once and for all. But why is it that we haven't got the appetite for doing this? I'd love to find out why is that.
And some of what Netanyahu's been talking about in the last 24 hours about his time with Obama as president has laid, extra fuel to that argument, I think. I think when it comes to Sinwar, to start there, for example, then, I mean, that is a great moment for a number of reasons. He was a particularly elusive figure. He was an elusive character who held this mystique because he was rarely seen. So he was like an Arsène Lupin, for example, or a Lord Lucan. So, you could never know where they were, and he could always retain that aura because of it. So to actually have the footage of his final moments and to be able to witness it is an unexpected surprise, in addition to knowing that he's dead and knowing that his body was there in the rubble. And of course, to see his body there in the rubble which he brought upon Gaza, to see his body lying there, that is the image that they don't want you to see. And of course, every time that when we've said it before in other shows, but I just want to emphasize it in case people haven't seen that one, when people like Al Jazeera show that clip that you just showed of the drone footage coming in, they zoom right in towards the end and they freeze the frame, which makes it look like the stick is much closer to the drone, and it makes it look like he hits the drone. So you can spin it by using that kind of propaganda, or you can attempt to spin it, but the truth is there in that wider shot, and we know the truth from that. And of course, ultimately, it is stick versus drone, and doesn't that sum up the the two civilizations, or one lack of civilization and one advanced civilization, is that you are properly protecting yourself and you've developed the technology to do so, versus somebody who's just at the, you know, the brute level of bashing things with sticks. And then you talk about Dave, for example. I think that's a good one to mention, because the ICC thing is a good example of the international, you know, the international community in action. And of course, the fact that they have put that warrant on him means that they're never going to declare him dead, because he provides the counterbalance now to the fact that Netanyahu and Gallant are on there. So they won't declare him dead, because he gives the illusion of neutrality to that process by his name being on there, even though we all know he's dead. And if they had any chance to show him alive, they would have done so as a propaganda coup months back now, well ahead of the recent deaths of the other terrorists in their various sites. But the important thing about decapitating the heads of these organizations and their key generals and military layers below them is the disarray that causes within these kind of dictatorial, you know, evil regimes where they've hung on to power for ages. They've got a serious amount of paranoia about the guy who's next in line and the one who's after him and who's going to take over and where are these factions. The knowledge is contained tightly. It's not shared. And therefore, the impact of a sudden, unexpected death of a whole bunch of them means it's a headless organization that is like a headless chicken and doesn't know what it's doing. And that exposes the weakness of evil as well.
So now, let me first read the super chat from Christian. Thank you so much. He says, like, Alex, I love the smell of victory. Like I like the smell of, and now he censored it, so I don't know what it says. Let's assume it's coffee in the morning. See you
I
next
think
year.
it's napalm. Napalm.
Oh, okay. I was scared of it starts with an N. It has like six letters. I was kind of afraid, but it didn't make any sense. So I'm like, what the hell could it say? But okay, napalm actually makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. It's great to have Alex, and so she can. She actually knows. All right. Now I wanted to go to sponsorship, but I don't want to do it right after this. So let me just quickly set up the next topic. So you know, we've covered Hamas, and there are a few things to cover Hamas from. But let's do this one now. I'm thinking this could be a good start. So yeah, of course, for those who remember, I like to call this the pager site. It was the act of Israel that was set up. Basically, it was set up years in advance, where they targeted. Well, they both delivered through some fake companies or some shell companies. They delivered them their pager devices, which then they managed to explode. We did a episode on it, Lebanon Explodes, which was a lot of fun. I came out with a lot of new forms of communication for Hezbollah. But that one was, again, that one was just 10 days before Hassan Nasrallah was killed. But it already set up something, I think, really great. At the same time, we might cover a bit later. But basically, that week was incredible in all. A lot of stuff was happening. And again, it was great to see. And sort of, we never did an episode on sort of the technological aspects of how basically the pages exploded. There's a lot of stuff from it. But I think the general setup is really funny, because the only reason why they were on pagers is because Israel few weeks or few days before has managed to kill and I don't remember his name, but basically a really important person in Hezbollah, and they killed him with a phone through the phone, or rather they called him on his phone to go into his house, and then they bombed that specific house. So because of that, and because Hezbollah was worried that their phones are targeted, they went into pagers, which Israel already intersected or already had control of, and could later explode. So again, this whole operation was incredible to see, amazing to see, and it gave us a few really good days. And I think sort of, you know, talking about the collapse of Iran's proxies, I think that was really the start of yeah, Hezbollah is not we shouldn't be afraid of Hezbollah, which we sort of still were at the time. I think we were talking that if Israel really means the destruction of Hezbollah seriously, it would cost a lot of lives. And while you know, I don't want to undermine sort of the deaths of the IDF soldier that did die, it is something much smaller than what we've originally expected. I mean, Alex, what did you think of the pager side?
Yeah, so I thought this one was really good, and the reason why is actually, you know, because I think that the effect that this mainly had was psychological, and I think that that really was the importance of kind of delivering this blow, is actually because then they okay, because you need to put yourself in the mind of your enemy. And what is the enemy thinking? Well, the enemy is thinking that they're invincible. The enemy is thinking that, you know, they have Allah on their side. Just look at all the ways that that we, you know, just look at all the evidence that we have Allah on our side. The Israelis are scared of us. We managed to defeat them, right, in 2006, you know, defeat, right? But so for them, this was an inevitability, that Hezbollah was going to have, you know, victory against the Israelis, right? And for me, that was, for me, I really loved seeing the look of despair on the Shia soldiers' faces when you saw their, you know, their fingers blown off and their eyes blown out, and they're kind of, you know, praying for mercy. Quite literally, when you saw those pictures, you can see on their faces, okay, this has been a complete moral defeat for them. And that is actually what I think kind of won it, is that it changed everything so completely that then I felt that the Israelis started to have the inevitability, as in the inevitability of their success. Okay, it became a matter of when is this victory going to come, right? It just completely changed. And, you know, that's actually really what you want, because it's very, very difficult to try to convince, you know, the enemy not to even bother fighting. You know, like it's, you know, Russia really works quite hard at this. You know, through propaganda and disinformation and kind of all of their various kind of mind games, that they, because they want to, you know, they want you to actually give up. And, you know, Russia's not very successful at it, but it was incredible, just on like 1 second, and it had a complete domino effect. All right. And I love as well kind of what Richard was saying there, about the paranoia. Okay, that's exactly what you want Hezbollah to have. All right, is the sense of paranoia, because you know, when you are you know, when you take out commanders, you're also losing like all of their strategic knowledge. All right. You no longer have the people who were able to make strategic battleground decisions. You only really have the kind of the very low level people, like the people who were actually attacked with the pagers. And so that's why you saw with Hezbollah, there's a lot of very chaotic thinking, a lot of very kind of chaotic, sporadic kind of, you know, firing of rockets. You understood that, yeah, they're putting up some kind of, you know, kind of fight, but it's very pathetic. You know, they really didn't appear to have their wits about them. And as well, that's also because in a regular army, okay, you will have somebody who is, you know, you'll have everybody from the, you know, the top generals all the way down to the brigadier generals, and then, you know, lieutenant colonels, majors, and so on. And everybody can basically step in to the next person's role, right? Like a person who's a major they will be being groomed right now, right, to take over, right, and be the lieutenant colonel. But in terrorist groups, you don't get that, or even, to be honest, it's actually Arab armies, you don't get that. Because they don't share information, because they feel, okay, if I share my information and my knowledge, then I'm I'm no longer going to be useful, and also I'm going to be perceived as being a threat. You know, you don't want you know, your subordinate to be that clever. And to really know how to do your job, because then he might just, you know, shoot you in the head and take your job, right? Or, you know, rat you out as well. So I just thought, you know, it was just beautiful. I loved it, everything about it. I loved the way it was lined up, and yeah, I just it was that was the definitive moment in the war, right? Those few minutes, okay, and from then, that was when everything changed, and then the victory became ours. It was just the inevitability was on our side, and the loss was theirs.
Yeah, and sort of this idea of these terrorist organizations sort of not being cohesive, sort of not wanting to share information, or sort of not wanting, sort of looking at everybody else as basically a threat to their position, really shows the stark difference between, let's say, the civilized world, the capitalist regimes, where in those regimes, ambition is a good thing, and everybody who is ambitious, everybody who wants to be productive, is a value to you, because you can both benefit in it by trading with them. And similarly with the army, it's they are all fighting for the same thing. It's all towards some common purpose. It's all for they know they can all benefit. But in these dictatorial regimes, in this sort of like crony almost way of waging, yeah, when sort of when it's not a right, when it's a privilege, then yeah, everybody is a threat to you. Everybody who has a skill is a threat to you, because he can take over your position, and that really I think shows the difference. But let me remind people again that today's episode of the reality show is sponsored by Jim Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. Let me read you a little bit from the bio. How is money created? Who creates it? Where does it go? A century ago, John Maynard Keynes famously warned us that inflation sets in motion all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction, and does it in a manner which not one man in a million is able to diagnose. That's an excerpt from The Economic Consequences of the Peace, 1924. Keynes believed that inflation was too complex for the average person to grasp, but this book aims to prove him wrong. A Black Hole in Economics unveils the hidden maneuvers of central banks and monetary authorities that systematically drain your wealth without your knowledge or consent. With this book, you'll become that one in a million who understands inflation and its profound effects on your life and wealth. Most importantly, you'll acquire the tools to protect and grow your wealth in a world of relentless inflation and financial repression. So I always talk about how, you people in America and UK had it good with inflation. I'm not sure how it exactly went in Israel during the COVID and after, but in Slovakia it was pretty bad. I think in basically in and generally the euro, I think in like 2 or 3 years, euro lost like 30% of its value. So sort of understanding how that happens and also how you can protect yourself against that, I think is a really good, not even good, it's a necessary information to have if you want to preserve your wealth or even have it grow. So link to that again is in the chat and in the description, and also all royalties go towards the support of Ayn Rand Centre UK, so you can keep us on the air. But Marco, I had one topic that I specifically wanted to bring up. Oh, many people, were talking about how this was a violation of international law. This was the worst thing Israel. It was basically a genocide. I mean, on the largest scale ever. Like I think the way it was sort of said, it was like Hitler was like, would be looking at it and would like, okay, you guys are going too far. That's what sort of the way it was sort of put as. But I mean, Marco, what do you think about this attack?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was disgraceful to kill all those pages and those beautiful walkie-talkies. I mean, they were perfectly functioning. Israel just added a bit of explosive to it, but otherwise the machines were fine. Imagine if the other side had done something like that. I mean, it's an incredibly complex and clever operation. You cannot fathom how much this must have taken in terms of intelligence and covert operations and thinking. It's amazing. It's just amazing. I mean, I bet Britain would have be able to pull off something like that. I can guarantee you. But imagine if the other side had done it, yeah, but by some miracle. I can guarantee you that next March, when there is an Oscar ceremony for the best film, it's going to be the film that tells the story of how the savages managed to pull this off against the Israeli. Guaranteed. But of course, Israel did it, so we're not even talking about it. It's something that goes way, way beyond modern warfare. It's just, comes out straight from a film. Yeah, and of course it occurs because these people probably went for the cheaper supply. They were probably they realized they could buy these things that were offered to them perhaps at a lower price, and they could pocket the rest.
Yeah, imagine how the guy who did the trade felt. Oh, guys, I found this great deal on 500 pages, but it's on sale right now, so you have to get it immediately.
Yeah,
It was a lady and she was a Mossad agent. That's the story. That's the.
Wait, is it official or?
Well, I mean, that's the thing that the IDSF said, which I think that they're pretty reliable, but who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got to watch out for those Black Friday deals.
It's a bit I've been like the official that checks for Israeli infiltration being an Israeli spy itself. So that happens in Iran, didn't it? So really, these people, these Middle Eastern savages don't have a clue or how to fight a war, because in the end, as Alex was talking about, these are brutal tribal institutions. They rely on fear, and that's why giving knowledge to the guy below you also means exposing yourself to to some degree of danger, because suddenly you're no longer A, fear, B, worshipped, or certainly not considered as unique or irreplaceable, and somebody will bump you off, somebody who wants to get your prestige. So all this kind of, and that's why Sinwar's only trusted really his butcher's brother, Mohammed, who's still, I think, have they caught him yet? I don't think they have, but it's probably the next one, isn't it? That's the nature. That's the nature of this kind of people. They rely on brutal violence and fear in order to keep the power, because beyond that they have got nothing else. And this episode of the pages and walkie-talkie demonstrate how easily they can be. Well, easily, how easily they go for something that effectively spells their destruction.
Yeah, I mean, that was a 4D chess move, wasn't it, in terms of intelligence and warfare? And it was intelligence in both senses of the word at its absolute zenith, really. The planning and cleverness of that attack. And to follow out the day after with the walkie-talkie, the effect on morale of that and the paranoia ripple of that, where people the day after would be afraid of their own toasters, is just perfect to see. And of course, as you said, Alex, that paranoia, I mean, you don't know the extent to which after that people are fighting their own shadows or turning on each other out of pure suspicion. And all of that is unknown, but a desirable collateral effect of the initial action itself. I think one of the things that was interesting about that particular attack from a broader perspective was the surprise with which it arrived with all the media across the world, the media that had been supporting the Palestinians all the way and distorting the narrative of this war to such an extent, was to how they could deal with that one. And they've still, even to this day, have really not been able to counter that. You get a bit of, oh, there were some children nearby, or that wasn't lawful or whatever, or the fringes, but even the core media don't go near that, because they recognize what a skillful effort that was, what a targeted effort that was, and what an effective effort it was to hit in so many places simultaneously such key members within Hezbollah, and therefore, of course, to force in the days afterwards, a meeting to what we're going to do, lads. We've just lost 3,000 operatives from being active, and to enable that to then be the opportunity to strike further against the leadership, and of course subsequent leadership, has been, as you say, Alex, that was the turning point, and together with Sinwar, you knew that the pendulum had swung, and it was only a few weeks earlier than that you were having a lot of people out on the streets in Israel, protesting and against the Netanyahu government, and there was this sense that is it too late? Are they going to cave? Is the government going to fall? Is the coalition going to fall apart? And within days of that, the pendulum had swung, and the outlook was totally different. And that's why we're at today, and that's why Syria has fallen. All of those steps along the road.
Jesus, spoiler much? We're just gonna talk about Syria. So we only have about 10 minutes left, and as I said, it's great. There's too many things to go through. I'll just mention that we'll probably do another episode on this, as well as we haven't even talked about the attacks on Iran directly, but sort of what I mentioned earlier, the killing of Nasrallah, and then his replacements, and then his replacement, and then his replacement. I think we haven't covered every single one, but if we've covered a bunch of them. And again, that was an incredible operation, because the killing of Nasrallah happened at the same time as Netanyahu's speech in the UN. And I'm still saying there was a missed opportunity. I think he should have went there and said, well, although it would look a little bit despotic, he basically should have said, do you know what we think of... Should I do like Netanyahu accent? Do you know what we do with our enemies? And he just puts it on, and it's like bombing of Nasrallah's basement, basically Nasrallah's base. Then there was also the what we've covered earlier in July. It was the Israeli strike on the Houthi port, al-Hadouya and Rasisa. Unfortunately, I think the Houthis are still the ones that need to be destroyed much more. After this specific attack, I think there was a little bit less of coming out of the Houthis, but they are still there. They are still a threat. Not to mention that they are still affecting the shipping. I think currently only 1/3 or something tons of basically shipping goes through that area than before October 7th, or that before the first Houthi strike. So there is still a lot to do there. And of course, in the last few days, the collapse of Assad's regime, as well as Israel, I think rightfully so, at least now it's temporary, seizing parts of Syria, but I think when it comes to, we've talked about that yesterday, so you can check out yesterday's video where we talk about it more. I mean, we only have 8 minutes left, so Alex, anything you want to pick out from this to comment on?
Yeah, so I do want to say, like, listen, in terms of the Houthis, it's actually not possible for Israel to destroy them without destroying themselves financially, because you would have to have, it can only be done by a country like the US, or like the UK, or like Saudi Arabia, because you would have to fly like non-stop fleets, from Israel. So that's very, very far. I mean, that's like very, very far, even in a fighter jet with all of this embargoed ammunition. I mean, if money, of course, Israel can destroy the Houthis if money was no object. Okay. And if manpower was no object, and if the Air Force wasn't needed for anything else, then they certainly could. But I don't think that that's feasible. Somebody else actually has to do that. Maybe Egypt should do it. You know, they receive billions of dollars in military equipment every year from the US, and it's them. It's Egypt whose economy has been completely decimated by the Suez Canal basically being shut down. There's no shipping going through the Red Sea. I mean, Egypt is, in terms of their economy, I think that their average salary is now like lower than many parts of like the actual third world. So this will just be the final nail in that coffin. And now I think Egypt is, you know, almost going to be a failed state from a, you know, really a country of an enormous prosperity. So maybe they actually should be the ones to go ahead and do that. Because I think now that the Houthis have killed like many like large groups of voyagers, many, you know, I think there's been quite a number of ships that have been completely sunk in the middle of the Gulf of Aden by the Houthis. Even now, still, you still have, it's you know, incredible, right, that the drones, you know, can travel that far. I actually wonder if it would be farther if I set a drone off today from Israel to try and hit Marco and Richard. And I also at the same time tried to hit the Houthis. I wonder which one would, you know, like arrive first. Very, very far away. And it's incredible how those Shahed drones that probably cost like, you know, $100 to manufacture are able to get that distance and then still blow up on target. And I think that exposed a really critical vulnerability in Israel's defense posture. That there's no, as Ukraine knows, there's no real way to actually properly defend yourself against those very, very small lightweight drones. Israel is, of course, you know, developing it, but it, you know, you also have to be able to develop it, like, you know, it's also an economic war. Okay, so if your Shahed drone is like the AK-47 of the sky and it costs $200 to manufacture, and I shoot a $50,000 missile at it, well, you've won the economic war. And that's also kind of playing a part with it. So you're seeing the development and now actual, I think, release date already of the Iron Laser, which if it would have come, you know, a year ago, then probably Israel could have maybe saved themselves like several tens of billions of dollars, most likely, firing, you know, by $50,000 missiles, $100,000 missiles at targets, you know, throughout the skies. Yeah, what can I say?
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And a super chat from Jeff. Thank you so much. Marco and Richard, you have 3 minutes to talk about those 4 topics, split between each of you. I mean, Marco, any last comments on either what we've talked about or
Yeah,
or
well,
all the other ones?
yeah. First of all, I was checking outside the window whether the drone from Alex is going to get here. But actually, the distance between Israel and the Houthis is the same as Israel as Daniel. So, you know, we are safe. I mean, it's like over 2,000 kilometers. It's not an insignificant distance. I think one of the people you haven't mentioned, one of the enemies of Israel you haven't mentioned in the little tombstone of the thumbnail, it's actually UNRWA, the representative of the world united against Israel, who fund an institution just to make sure Jews are killed. And you know, today there was I think a New York Post or Washington Post, one of those, they actually proved that some of the attackers, or sort of 7, were part of UNRWA in different areas, and even headmaster in Lebanon was an UNRWA Hamas member. So there you go. So yeah, I mean, lots have been achieved, but lots and lots of significant enemies, fundamental people who are embedded so deeply in our institutions that you're not going to get rid of them by bombing the Middle East. We've seen that Israel a number of times can defend itself. They done it in 48, in 67, and again this last year. They can defend themselves, but the problem that there's something bigger hiding behind our institution, which makes Israel life harder and harder. And I think unless we root it out, unless we realize what kind of poisonous snakes are hiding in an institution like the UN and certainly the left. I mean, here in Britain, we allow imam funded by Iran to spew propaganda. So until we get rid of that, and it's very easy to follow the money, it's very easy. But if we don't do that, we're never going to be able to have a Middle East which is not controlled by Iran.
I think that's a good point to add to there. The fact that so many people across the world have shown their faces in the course of this year and a bit, have shown their true anti-Semitism, their true reaction to Israel, and they've attempted to work for the enemy within the Western countries, and whether that's media figures, many of whom we've covered on this channel, whether it's the universities and institutions, or whether it's certain governments in different parts of the world, they've shown their colours really, and I think and including some of those who swing one way and swing the other, depending on the latest news. They've done sufficient swinging against Israel to demonstrate that they are not the allies that can be depended upon when it comes down to it. So Israel has learned many things through the course of this. In fact, that the extent to which it can rely on other people and the extent to which it does have to fight itself. And of course, whichever administration is in the US, you're going to see as we move into the new one, the impact of two different administrations during the same war. Now, the same war might be at a different phase by the time we get to the 20th of January or late January, and all sorts of things could have happened by then. But at least we're going to see what the next period of time, the next 4 years of support from the US, together with what Israel's done across the Middle East, will mean for the whole region.
And with that, let me remind people that today's episode of the reality show has been sponsored by Jim Brown's new book, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. You can find out more about it following the link, following the pinned comment, the link in the description, as well as the link in the chat. So you should not be able to miss it. And also all royalties go towards the support of Ayn Rand Centre UK, so you can educate yourself and you can help us keep on the air. We have Atlas Shrugged Book Club coming out in just about a minute or so. Link for that is also in the chat. That's for YouTube members and ARCUK website members only. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective and Reality Show. Until then, bye-bye.